Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be joined by the fantastic Laura Benanti to talk all about Gossip Girl and her many, many other projects as well, as I feel like you always have about 10 things on the go at any time. And with Gossip Girl, I was really interested in finding the voice and the tone of that show because you do have original creative team members who were part of recreating it, rebooting it, and creating this new iteration. So, how did that really help in walking into a brand new show, but having such a sense of what the voice and what the tone of the show was going to be as you went into your character development?
I never watched the original. Shh, don't tell anyone. This is
Just
a
everyone
secret
on the
between
internet.
you and me and the World Wide Web. Um, so for me, it really is always just about being truthful, like trying to come in and be like a multi-dimensional human being. Um, and Josh Safran, who is our showrunner, who is always there, is so wonderful and so helpful and really has his finger on the pulse of the tone that people are looking forward to, the sort of nostalgia of it, and then how much the world has changed in that time and how we sort of address that and have that tonal shift. My character, I play the mother of Emily Allen Lind, and who plays Audrey. And my character has gone through sort of an embarrassing, not sort of, she's gone through an embarrassing divorce, sort of a public divorce. She's an athleisure wear designer, and she's just not her best self at this moment. Poor Kiki. I love her name, Kiki. Um, so for me, it really was just about like showing up and trying to be like as real and grounded as possible. I feel like everyone has a different job on this show, and because it is sort of like a tonal high wire act, some people are meant to be comedic, some people are meant to be grounded. My character, I think, is meant to be a bit of both, where she certainly loves her alcohol, but then also, which is kind of funny, but then also she's really going through something very real, and there's some very tender moments, and I absolutely love working with Emily. I think she's a genius. So it's been really fun to work on something that is so like highly anticipated and feel so confident that the people in charge are going to make sure we all do our jobs.
Yeah. And to your point as well, you're bringing a character into a space where she's been through this long marriage, had a daughter together, and then her husband has left her for her best friend. And there's a lot of emotional complexities to build into that. But in
Mhm.
the scenes where we're seeing the repercussions of that, so far we're just seeing it solely through your character. So, how do you set about building a lot of that history and a lot of that relationship dynamic to bring it to that space performance wise, when we're coming in and just seeing you in a scene in a bed by yourself with your daughter for the first time?
What a great question. I do a lot of like Jungian dream work in order to sort of align my subconscious mind to that of the character. Because for me, the performances that I admire the most are the ones that feel deeply personal, where you do not see the person acting. Like, obviously, that's the place we all want to get to. So, the place I'm consistently working toward is where I am able to take something from my own personal life where I felt the shame, the embarrassment, all of the things that the character is feeling, and bring that up to the point that it feels very real. And so I did spend a lot of time sort of journaling and doing work on my own because I also have a very limited amount of content to sort of bring the layers of this character in a way that feels fully realized. Because you're meeting a lot of people in this show, right? So, like, how do you make your character stand out? How do you make your character feel really grounded? And so, I always do a lot of preparation before I walk onto any set so that I'm ready to go. Obviously, leaving room for the director to be like, no, 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 that is not it. Um, but fortunately, that wasn't the case. We were very aligned in how we wanted it to be.
Yeah, and you bring your character into such a space of emotional fatigue and emotional gravitas from everything that she's been going through. There's reference very early on to her being on medication. And so how did you figure out what you wanted the exact kind of emotional space of her to be and just where that would put her mentally as well? Because this is a character who literally can't get out of bed every day at the
Mhm.
point when we meet her in the show.
I think that we're we're beginning to have really important conversations in the world, right? About mental health, about racism, about homophobia, about the patriarchy. I feel like we're having all of the conversations that we had just been like, everything's fine. So I had very, very bad postpartum depression and anxiety after I had my daughter. It was excruciating. It was debilitating. It really robbed me of the first 6 months of my daughter's life. And it's something I still have to be mindful of. So for me, it was really important not to come in playing a trope of a sad lady, like a sad rich lady whose husband left her. Like, I didn't want that. I wanted to represent, frankly, mental illness and depression in a real way because I have experienced it. And in a way that feels devoid of commentary. Does that make sense? Where it's like, I'm not commenting on it, I'm not judging it, I'm just experiencing it. So for someone to be in a place where they literally can't get out of bed and can't tend to their child, I know that space. I lived in it and it's hard. So it was kind of brutal to get to. But ultimately, I think it illuminates so much of what is going on with Emily's character as well. And she is such an important part of the show. It's like I wanted to be that piece to her puzzle, so to speak.
And there's reference to the fact that your character, because of everything that she's struggling with, there's things like parent teacher conferences, and she just hasn't been as actively involved in her daughter's life. And yet at the same time, we get a sense that she has been, because when she does go out and she sees her daughter with her friend, she knows her daughter's friend. She knows who
Yeah.
they are. She has a relationship and a rapport there. So did you really want to construct it as something that this is from everything that she's been going through? This is everything that she's processed, but this isn't the parent that she's always been to her daughter?
It was important to me that people see, like, what we're meeting a shell of a person. So it was important to me to layer in moments where you see her, like little moments where you see her humor, where you see her love for her daughter, where you see the person she was before she was crushed, under the weight of like a cheating husband and being betrayed by her friend. So it was important to me to layer that in because, you know, it's hard to connect to a shell. So in order for the audience to connect to my character, just she needed to have her humanity still bubbling underneath, ready to move on, wanting to be better.
Yeah. And then, we see through one scene as well when she does go out and she's had a few drinks
Mhm.
that all of a sudden someone referring to her as Miss instead of Mrs. all of a sudden just completely flips her back to the space where she was back in her house in bed and takes her to a completely different emotional track. And I thought that performatively that was a really interesting choice and dynamic to have to play where, she's finally trying to bring herself out and then it's just one word and one thing that brings everything crushing back in her head. Was it very easy to figure out what those shifts were going to be for her tonally in those moments, or was some of that a little bit of exploration on set when you were shooting scenes like that?
Some of it was a bit of an exploration. The beauty of playing drunk is drunk people, there's no rhyme or reason to why they behave the way they behave. So that's so fun, right? Because one minute she can be like funny and spitting her olive into a martini glass, and the next second she's like screaming and cutting her hand open. And that is drunk people. So, we definitely on set figured out the layers of that. But everyone has their trigger, right? Like, so for me personally, when it was like breastfeeding, if someone brought up breastfeeding, I would lose my mind because it was something that didn't work for me and my daughter. And I had so much guilt about it. And I absolute lunatic. So I understand that, where you can be having like a perfectly fine conversation about a onesie or whatever. And then someone calls you miss, and you're like, I will murder you here, you know? So I think the volatility of that, you know, someone who is struggling with mental illness is off their center. They're not aligned with their center in that moment. So she's easily blown about. And that's really fun to play. And I think makes for just like a more interesting, more dimensional character, especially, you know, when you have such contained scenes and so little content to sort of be like, this is who I am. You know, I think it was important to like really craft that.
Yeah. There's always so many intricacies to playing drunk to begin with. And then there's the added element with your character where you know that she's mixing alcohol and meds as well. So
Yeah.
how did you set about figuring out exactly what that trajectory and what that track was going to be for her in that scene?
I think it didn't take her as long to get drunk. You know, I think she probably, you know, had a drink as she was getting ready at home. And for anyone who has, you know, who is on meds, you're just more sensitive to alcohol. So, you know, it probably took her 2 drinks to be just hammered, you know? So I basically I tried to come into the scene like she was 1 drink in and like feeling pretty good. And then it was just downhill from there.
And you were working on this show at the same time that you were shooting Younger, but I feel like you're always working on multiple projects at the same time and prepping for one role while you're on stage for something else and shooting something different and then going doing Colbert, you know, the evening. So do you find it quite easy to compartmentalize and to be able to jump between projects and between characters and styles of performance even? Or do you have some sort of tactic or process that you use, particularly when you're jumping between two characters like that are so different to each other?
That's such a good question. It's not a problem on set. Like, I don't have a problem going from one character to another, but I do think I have an issue coming back to myself. So that is, I think, the thing to work on. And for Quinn, like Quinn was I just played her like a man. You know, I just showed up every day and pretended to be a white man. And so that was easy and fun, and nothing major was required of me, you know, just to be sort of like wear incredible clothes and be funny and sardonic and witty and whatever. So and it was such a joy, such a wonderful group of people. I really, really loved working on that show.
But you're talking there about the masculine energy that you always brought to Quinn and playing her like a straight white man. But at the same time, you never had her as a character who left behind her femininity either and really balanced those two gender directions in her. So was there a consciousness in the way that you thought about the moments where she was going to be incredibly masculine and the ways in which she would still be feminine? Or was it just something that you found very naturally because of the way that she was written in the scripts?
Yeah, just the way she was written. And honestly, her clothes are so feminine. Her clothes are so beautiful. She uses her sexuality as a weapon. So that sort of took care of the femininity, for lack of a better word, or like the sexuality of womanhood. And then I just was like, who is the biggest like rich asshole that I know? And I'm just gonna be that, you know? So that's kind of what I did.
And it's interesting that her biggest drive and success factor is also her biggest downfall, in that she puts herself first. She's just driving for business success, but then that's also the reason that certain things don't work out. And so was it quite interesting to go into scenes and to get to play that same characteristic and that same trait in her, but in the different directions that it would take her?
Yeah, you know, men don't ever have to think about that. Men don't ever go into a situation going like, are they going to think I'm nice? You know, and they're very able to keep their like personal and professional lives separate. And so what I did is I just like went into every interaction being like, I'm going to win. She's going to win. She's going to win in business, and she's going to win in personal life as well. And I think when I really started to look at the other characters through Quinn's eyes, I could see how like weak they are. You know, she's like, oh, really? Like, oh, you're going to cry about like your boyfriend who used to run this company? Grow up. You know, like there was definitely a part of me that aligned with Quinn in some ways, where I was like, ladies, pull it together. You're running a company. Like, so it was interesting to see how we start to think like our characters, you know, like she is not a person who's going to prioritize her personal life over her career. And but we don't ask men to do that. We ask women to do that. And I just think that's a really interesting thing to notice. So people hated Quinn, loved to hate Quinn, you know, like people will say things on social media where I'm like, y'all know this is a television show, right? But I'm like, I wonder if they would hate her as much if she were a man. And I don't think so.
I think you're absolutely right about that as well.
Yeah.
And when you're coming into a show like Younger that has such a specific comedic sensibility to it,
Mhm.
did you find yourself thinking at all about what you wanted the comedic sensibility of Quinn to be as a character? Or again, was it something that just came back to the way that she was on the page and just found it very naturally?
Yeah, I see the world through the lens of a sense of humor. My tendency is to find humor in things and be funny. Not be like I'm never trying to be funny. If something's funny to me, it's because you're saying it totally earnestly. You know what I mean? And it just happens to be funny. So I didn't think about how to make her funny. I just think she's sort of a ridiculous person who like, answers a phone call from Nancy Pelosi with like, "Hey girl." She's just like, I find her very, very humorous, but it wasn't like I had to plot that out. That was a combination of the writers and I think them getting to know me and my sense of humor and all of that. So
Yeah. And it's interesting when you talk about other people's perspective of you as a performer and the fact that for a long time everyone just saw you as solely very dramatic. And in recent years, you've done so many great comedy bits, and especially the Melania Trump impersonation has made people now almost pigeonhole you in the opposite direction. Do you find yourself pushing against the grain and trying to work against that to be like, no, actually, I do all of these things? Or do you just let yourself go with it and kind of see where different projects are going to take you?
it's funny. I definitely made a concerted effort after I won the Tony for Gypsy to do plays, to do straight plays, because there was, at least in 2008, this sort of misnomer that somehow people in musical theater are not real actors. Um, and that's not true. And so I was like, you know what? People like to see, it's easy for all of us to see things in a linear way, right? We like to compartmentalize. It makes us feel more comfortable. And it gives us a sense of like control, I think. So people were like, okay, she's a musical theater actress. Okay. And she does a lot of drama. She's serious. And I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? So then I did a straight play, Chris Durang's straight play that was a comedy at the Public Theater. And then after that, I did another straight play on Broadway. And then I started doing a lot more television. I made a concerted effort to say no to musicals, yes to plays, yes to television and film, so that I wouldn't have to continuously prove that I am an actor, a real actor, quote unquote. So that has been really great because I've been able to do, on stage, musicals, plays, comedies, dramas. Awesome. And similarly in TV, I've gotten to do dramas and comedies. Um, you know, I have a film coming out in the fall called Worth, that I'm so proud of, that is like deeply serious and very, very emotional. And then there's also Quinn, so I feel like it's not because I have some like grand master plan where I'm like, I need everyone to know I'm good at everything. I just enjoy using my brain in all these different ways. So I enjoy singing. I enjoy putting out an album. I enjoy producing the documentary that I produced for HBO Max. I enjoy that. I enjoy doing comedy on TV. I enjoy like wringing myself out in a movie. I enjoy singing with a symphony. Like I love to do all of it. And I'm so grateful that I have been given the opportunity to do that, because there are so many people in this world who are good at all of those things, really good at all of those things and love them. And for whatever reason, they're not in that position. And it really just is luck at the end of the day, so I'm acutely aware of how lucky I am. And so I want to show up to all of these different things, my best self, you know?
Yeah, and you mentioned your movie Worth There that's coming out in the fall,
Yeah.
and I saw it when it played at Sundance, and it's really a phenomenal piece of storytelling, and in the way that it's told as well. I wanted to ask about working with the director Sarah Colangelo and the way in which she helped everybody to figure out the space that you needed to go to take your performances, because it is talking about New York, it is talking about 9/11, and I believe that you were living in New York at the time as well. So there's a real emotional place that you're pulling from that performance that really comes through. But also at the same time, the characters are so dimensional that it doesn't feel like we're being dragged into this bleak space throughout the whole film as well, which I thought was an interesting balance to find for everybody.
Yeah, Sarah is a brilliant person. She's a brilliant director and also just deeply human. Um, I love a lady director. You know, they definitely have more um, working against them, in that I think our patriarchal society has decided that men are in charge, and she's this like tiny little blonde, young looking person. And so I think sometimes it throws people. But she is so smart. She knows what she wants, she knows what we need. And she also is like, trusts the people that she casts. So in my audition, like I had to sit there for like 5 more minutes and just like cry hysterically because it feels so deeply personal. 9/11 to a New Yorker. I grew up right outside of New York in a commuter town. And I remember when I finally did leave the city, I think it was like a week after 9/11, and went home to be with my parents for the weekend, all of the cars that were still in the commuter lots of just people who were never going to come home. And I think anyone who lived through 9/11 at that time, you just will never forget it, you know? Um, and so I think I really understood this character right away. And I think that's why she cast me. And then, trusted me to continue to grow in this character. And I trusted her to lead me off a cliff. I ended up actually getting really physically sick after that job, because I think your body doesn't know the difference. Like if you're sobbing hysterically most of the day, your body's not like, we're just acting. Your body is still taxed emotionally and physically, so it's a lot.
Yeah, and you were bringing up before the documentary that you did, Homeschool Musical, and I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about that because when you first reached out and had people start posting their performances that they weren't getting to do on stage, there was just such a beautiful organic element to and celebration to it and community that really came together that was so representative of theater. And I know that people had approached you with various ideas about how to turn it into a bigger platform, and some of it was turning it into a reality competition and things like that. And that just to you didn't feel like the right fit because you didn't want to turn it into something competitive and take away just that really pure, genuine community sensibility to it. And so what was it about working with them and this documentary special that came together where you all just found what was the really organic space where we can give this an even bigger platform, tell more of a story, but still be true to the genesis of the fact that this was just you going on social media one day and going, hey, send me your performances, I want to watch them.
Mara, I just have to take a second to say, like, you are such a thoughtful interviewer. Like, I'm so impressed and grateful for these questions where you have clearly, like, really done your homework. That's not the right way to put it. You've really clearly researched, and like, it really means a lot to me. That's not always the case. And I'm just really grateful. Thank you. Um, yeah, I mean it. So yeah, like I went on social media just to say, like, you're not invisible. Like, this is so incredibly disappointing and I'm so sorry. And if you want to perform for me, you can. Thinking I get like 20 videos, and then it was like thousands and thousands of videos. And it was, I think, like the first thing of its kind during quarantine. So there was a lot of press about it too. Um, and so then naturally, people are like, how can we monetize this? Which didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the heart of it. the heart of it came out of genuine love and concern. And it just felt gross to try to make it anything else. So the first thing I did was turn it into like free online concerts for isolated senior citizens and kids in children's hospitals. So that's the very first thing that we did, was sort of take the joy that people on social media were experiencing and then bring it to these particularly isolated communities who might not necessarily be on social media. Um, and then World of Wonder reached out to me. They do RuPaul's Drag Race, and their hearts were just the same. You know, they come from loving theater. They come from being a world of outsiders, and which is what a lot of these kids feel they are. And they also wanted to do something like deeply good with it. And then when we met with HBO Max, it was the same thing. They were like, let's make something beautiful out of this. And originally it was going to be an original musical. We were going to write a scripted musical and, you know, have the kids film it virtually in their homes. And then when George Floyd was murdered, we all were like, we cannot be white people putting words into the mouths of Black artists. It's not right, you know? And I wish we had come to that conclusion before that moment, but we didn't. And that's the reality of white privilege and how I think it can sort of obfuscate the importance of what's happening around you. You know, I think privilege is just that. Like, you don't think of it because you don't have to. And we were like, we want to give these kids a platform to tell their own stories. So then we had to completely recast because we were no longer looking for these specific characters. We were just looking for people with incredible stories. And so we ended up choosing 7 graduated high school seniors from the class of 2020. And they led us virtually into their homes. And then we walked them through with our incredible team, you know, Alex Coletti, our brilliant director, and Mary Mitchell Campbell, our music director, and, you know, just a remarkable group of artists. They taught these young people how to make their own music videos. And I'm so proud of them. Alana Bright is now starring in a TV show because Paradigm watched the documentary and was like, that young woman is a star, which of course she is. And then now she's going to be on a television show. So, you know, I'm really proud of it. You know, was it taking over the world? No. Is it, you know, some competitive thing where people can call in and vote for whomever? No. Would that probably have made a ton of money? Sure. We hardly made anything on this. This was like a labor of love. But I would rather that. I would rather look back and be like, I'm really proud of this thing than be on season 10 of, you know, some competition thing. That's not the heart of why we started this. So.
Yeah. Well, I think you can tell that in the execution. It turned out so thoughtfully with everything. And, you know, thank you so much for talking to us all about Gossip Girl and all of these other projects that you've been working on. It's such a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.